Today, we're talking about how to ride the highs and lows of the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship. Today, my guest is Josh Grossfeld. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corkin here. I am the host of this show, and you know if you've listened before that every week I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of different companies. We've had Netflix and Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, lots of great episodes. Check out the archives. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise25, our company where we help B2B businesses and clients to get referrals and strategic partnerships using done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And if you've ever thought about starting a podcast, one of the privileges of my life has been to be able to talk and feature interesting people like our guest here today, and to feature them in episodes that go live across the internet for everyone else to check out. So if you want to learn more about how that works, go to rise25.com, or you can email us at support@rise25.com. All right, my guest here today, Josh Grossfeld, is the co-founder of Agency. It's a communications firm focused on branding and direct mail, and Goodstock & Co. It's an e-commerce and fundraising platform. He's based in Washington, D.C., where he's a recognized figure in the political communications realm. He's received a number of awards, including Rising Star Award from Campaigns and Elections magazine, which is the magazine for his industry, and 40 Under 40 Award from the American Association of Political Consultants. And so he's been involved in political consulting his entire life, and we're going to talk about that. That's the world that I was in for a brief period of time, and so it's exciting for me to be able to dip back into it. But Josh, let's start with your upbringing. So you grew up in Arizona, and you actually, your father was an entrepreneur. Your father was a political consultant, and so you got to witness that from a young age. So tell me about that, what that was like growing up, witnessing your father involved in local political campaigns.
Yeah, no, he started a political consulting firm when I was about 8 or 9. So I spent my entire life on the back of campaign offices, pounding the pavement and putting yard signs into really hard dirt and going on TV shoots, et cetera. So he had a general consulting company, so GC, which is a pretty common model back then. So they would do polling, they would do television ads, direct mail, et cetera. And I just loved being a part of all of that. So every summer would spend at the office getting over here, strategic conversations about who we're going to target, on TV shoots. I got to design direct mail, design websites, did that Navajo Nation's president's race, and really just got to be exposed to sort of all the intricacies of how campaign strategy works. And I think the most important part of it was really the client service component of it. It is part therapy, part strategy when you're dealing with a lot of candidates and staff.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Knowing how to manage that. My mom's a therapist. So have those two sets. I think were really helpful growing up, and have proved really helpful in my career moving forward. Is sort of really being able to navigate all those different personalities and making sure that you're able to communicate effectively the candidate's message, but also internally within like the staff and all the different personalities involved in a lot of these campaigns and who they draw out.
And you were actually a bit of an entrepreneurial kid because you said you had your own local Blockbuster business. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so we were on the cul-de-sac. We were like one of the two houses that had HBO. So I would record movies all the time, and then rent them out for 50 cents to $1 to kids in the neighborhood until one of my teachers told me I was probably violating some sort of copyright law. So I just pivoted back to my baseball card stand, which I would sell stuff on the weekends at different card shops and whatnot.
I still have a box of them in my garage. I'm waiting for them to suddenly spike in value.
It was supposed to be my lottery ticket. It did not pan out.
It's crazy. I mean, I bought like these full complete sets of like Upper Deck in the late 80s, and early 90s that were like $100 then, and they're like less than that now. Or they're
that 89 that 89 Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card was supposed to be my ticket to everything.
I know. I wish I'd gotten one Bitcoin instead. So you also started a website development company. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was, the mid 90s. So, anyone that knew how to do HTML was a wizard at the time. And one of my dad's clients, the Utah State Democrats, needed a site. So he encouraged me to sort of register my own company with the state. And so I created Merlin Media Works, which was my little website development company, and built out that website and a handful of other candidate sites when I was like 13 or 14, for a handful of different political sites.
Any businesses or just consultant? Or just campaigns? Okay.
Just
Yeah.
I did 2 or 3 campaigns, and I did a handful of like local companies, so like an events company, and like a restaurant at the time. But no one had, the HTML was the whole web was a mystery
So
at the time.
primitive.
Yeah,
Yes. I
you could
mean,
figure it out, like you're golden. So I just it wasn't too hard when you dug in. So
I
just
did
got
some, programming in HTML back then, and it's so laborious and
yeah.
slow and time consuming, and just like make one little tweak and then you go see it go live, like, oh, cool, a word, and it
Yep.
was just like so rudimentary.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about wizardry. I mean, the wizardry is designing websites today where you can
Yeah.
just, design it and, think it and tell
Right.
ChatGPT and they create it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You worked on some interesting campaigns. Talk about the Prop 106 No on English Only in Arizona campaign.
Yeah. So there's kind of things coming back full circle at the time that in Arizona there was a movement to make English the only legal language in Arizona, and change a lot of documents around, so a full English only campaign. So we got to work on that campaign, the No on 106, to kind of ensure that there was multiple languages available to folks for filling out certain government forms, et cetera, which was important at the time. It's still important. There's a lot of different sort of probably less than ideal rationales for why people are trying to do that. So I was proud of that victory. Got to do the Navajo Nation's president's race. Sam Coppersmith for Congress, who was a really really great guy to get in Congress at the time. And then got to do the Clinton campaign with my dad.
And you actually
Work.
hung up on the White House once?
I thought it was a crank call. So yeah, unfortunately during the conference, when they were trying to conference people in before their
So,
actual conference call
so you got a
began,
phone call, someone said this is the White House, and you're like, yeah, whatever, click.
probably not. Yeah, so hung up on them as well. So yeah, but got to have a really great experience with sort of all that exposure that was pretty unique, and frankly, as someone who's been in this industry for so long, reflecting back, really recognize how privileged I was to be able to have a family that understood that this was a career you could be in, particularly given the cyclicality of it all. Like most folks that work in politics, that work in campaigns, they work for 6 to 12 months and they're out of a job for another 6 to 12 while they hop around. And knowing that was a career path that you could actually do at such a young
Yeah.
age was
I
great.
have to say, one of the privileges of my life was working at the tail end of the Clinton years in the Clinton White House. And one of the privileges of doing that was being able to call virtually anyone on the planet. And it didn't matter like who you're calling. Just, you could leave a message back then and be like, yeah, can you just tell them to call John back at the White House? And you'd get a call back instantly. People would call back so quickly. And I'm sure I had some people hang up at me too, thinking it was a prank call. And I want to ask about from a business perspective. So it sounds like your dad was operating a consulting agency on the left side of the spectrum, the Democratic side of the spectrum, as you are. Arizona is traditionally a very conservative, Republican-leaning state. What, from a business perspective, lessons can we take away from that? Working, being kind of on one side of the spectrum when overwhelmingly the majority of that state, at least at that time, was more Republican.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of different things. Like one, like the business side of it's so strange because you do have to pick a side, right? When I went and launched my own firm, my father-in-law was like so excited. He's like, great, he's going to do all these introductions to these wonderful Republican friends of his. I'm like, I can't. You got it. So he, as a businessman, he didn't understand the fact that
You immediately eliminate 50% of the
percent of
potential
the market. Correct.
clients. Yeah.
Like I don't
Yeah.
understand how
Right.
can you do
Yeah.
this. But there's a certain amount of of devotion that folks expect out of you being in an ideology while you're working. But yeah, being the underdog in a state like Arizona or other places, I think you learn how to be scrappy. You learn how to. You're usually not going to get as much funding, oftentimes, for those campaigns. You learn how to do a lot more with less resources, and really learn how to sort of break out of some traditional molds that you might expect. So I think one of the biggest challenges for any party that is sort of in the minority in any particular district or state is like, how do you set yourself apart from the party, right? So how are you not a traditional Republican or not a traditional Democrat? And so those types of lessons, I think, in sort of how to go against go against the grain and really think differently and present yourself differently in a way that's as appealing and widely possible to voters is
Yeah.
while remaining authentic is the big challenge and really good lessons to learn.
I mean, especially helpful for businesses that are kind of in a commoditized industry where they have a lot of different competitors. How do you break out from that noise and establish yourself and, communicate to potential clients and customers that you are different from everyone else who's out there, whether it's you're selling widgets or a service or whatever?
Yep. And I think it comes down to what we found oftentimes, and like while we do a lot of political work, we're looking to do more and more outside of just the purely political space. It comes down to sort of how do you tell that story well? How do you tell it authentically? And people's bullshit meters are high, and so how do you navigate that in a way that really presents, in particular with politics, everyone assumes you're fake, right? And so how do you really present those candidates in a way that is true to who they are and authentic and really connects with voters about the things they care about versus what they're told they should care about.
Yeah. Now, at some point, you decided that in order to really, if I want to be in this industry and I learn in this industry, I need to go to where the industry is everything, which is Washington, D.C. So you come to Washington, D.C., and you end up working in agencies. Tell me a little bit about what that was like. I've been an intern in Washington, D.C., bottom of the barrel. And but what it was like for you, going to where politics is the industry.
Oh yeah, I mean, so going from Arizona to DC, I didn't have any suits or anything like that. So my really wonderful cousin bought a what he just said was like the suit I had to have, which is the gray pinstripe suit that would have to be wool.
Oh,
So,
jeez, man.
I
Yeah,
moved to
not
DC.
many of those in Phoenix.
No, so I
No.
get my gray pinstripe suit, move to DC, and I think I'm going to work on the Hill. I don't think about going to consultancy. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go learn where, how laws are made and spend, a whole month of July walking around DC Hill, just absolutely sweating bullets the whole time.
In a
And
wool suit.
yeah,
Jeez.
to the point where like one of the staff assistants who was kind enough to like, try to get me into an interview, pulled me aside and make sure I was okay because of, just sweating so much and
And you're
realized
from
pretty,
Arizona. You should be okay with this, but
I
you
should,
don't
but
wear a wool suit
the
around
dry heat
Arizona.
is a real thing, and
Yeah,
a wool suit and the
that's
humidity in
true.
DC is
That's
a totally
true.
different thing. So I figured out pretty quickly that that was not something I wanted to do, but ended up getting a great job at a firm called Mausher, Slapp and Hoppy Cooper. At the time, I think they had swithed. It was Crown Smasher Schlackman Hoppy prior to that. The sort of the preeminent direct mail firm in the country. So really fit well with what my goals were. I want to kind of come learn from the best. Got some really, really great mentors there, met my wife there, and really learned about sort of like the forefront of, how things operate. And then just kind of stuck with it. And when worked, helped start an organization called Democratic Gain, with a woman named Amy Pritchard, which was devoted to sort of helping make sure more people could get into the work of politics and work on campaigns. And there was like a structure and a pipeline to make that happen. And then went and worked at another direct mail firm for like the next 10 years. Kind of continue to learn and grow my craft and learn about, how all this works.
Yeah. I've interviewed others who do mail of different forms on this podcast, and mail has changed dramatically over the last 15, 20 years because as everything's moved digital, there's actually less competition for the mailbox. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, when I first got into this till now, I really never thought I'd still be in this long, to be quite honest. I thought, and this was the talk of the industry at the time, like digital's coming in, it's going to sort of, blow that out, blow direct mail out as a medium. And what we've seen happen is quite the contrary. We've seen, that pie's grown a little bit larger. The competition's been lower in the mailbox, and some of the noise that has been created by the bifurcation of television and like the amount of digital ads people get. Mail is now ironically one of the least saturated of the media.
Hmm.
media. Now it's gotten more expensive, so your mail volume, your programs don't have to be as large. But direct mail still allows you to like directly target to individuals like who you want to receive your message without having to go through a bunch of different hoops, and they're getting it, like whether or not they like getting it, they have to pick that piece of paper up and they have to look at it before they toss it in the trash. And I think some of the changes that we're trying to see in the industry that a handful of us, particularly in the political industry, are trying to work through is sort of how do we take some of the great things about digital in terms of the transparency and accountability, and apply that to mail. And so fortunately there's a lot of technologies that are coming around there with the scannable barcodes and the ability to sort of really track delivery rates, where I think we're going to be able to bring a lot of the that transparency and accountability to direct mail. There'll be a dashboard that we're building out right now where folks can actually see the delivery rates of their mail and have that trigger different events for maybe a follow-up text or a follow-up phone or a follow-up email. So it can really be part of this sort of omni-channel part of communication for the
Yeah,
campaign.
because we've gotten used to, at least on the digital side, to seeing results instantaneously, hour by hour. So it's kind of weird to see such lagging indicators. It could be 6 months later when people cast their ballot. It doesn't
Correct.
help really much in terms of a campaign making a decision earlier in the race.
Yeah, so we're really trying to build in more measurables along the way there to help, provide some checkpoints along the way about how those campaigns are going.
And do you see technology affecting your industry? Like, is AI gonna change the way that you do what you do, or do you think it'll
Yeah,
still be not as much of an impact?
no, I think it could be a pretty big impact, and I think some of the struggles that the party and the industry is going through right now is sort of how to balance that, right? I mean, the uh, a lot of the campaign messaging is not incredibly rocket science, right? We go through a process of, agreeing on different messaging, but once that messaging is locked, it's a lot about repetition. And so, an AI could create a lot of that content. I think one of the things at our firm that we're really trying to emphasize is that, ultimately this needs to be for humans by humans. And so while there may be AI tools that are used to sort of help, create the baseline of a product, that final 50% of it needs to be done by humans with like that the real viewpoint of like how is someone on the ground really going to react to this.
Yeah.
But very easily, if someone wanted to, they could create a company right now with one employee and use AI to kind of crank out everything. And I think they'd probably have a pretty good business. I don't know how long it would last, but I think you could definitely make a go of it right now.
Yeah.
The technology available out there for the creation of the content and the design itself, it's there. It's there right now.
You have had your company since 2015. Well, first of all, why did you decide to go out and strike out on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I worked at another firm for about 10 years, learned a lot there. Thought I was going to sort of on partner track, and it became clear that the owner sort of, as well intentioned as he was not ready to sort of let go of his baby in that way. And I was definitely ready to sort of take on my own thing. And so I took the leap. My wife, fortunately, at the time worked at Google, so we had a little bit of a cushion to know at least for that next year that we could try to pull it off. And so jumped with no clients, just hoping that we could put something together. Fortunately, within a month, got a pretty good contract for a Medicaid health insurance company that, kept things going. And then a few of my clients started coming back, and we were able to sort of build something out pretty quickly over the 15 to 16 cycle. So that was, one was just pure like entrepreneurial instinct. Like I had to do my own thing.
Yeah.
But also having worked in the industry for so long, I also knew there's another way to sort of build out these companies. And my business partner, Emily Parcell, felt the same way. So, we both came from wonderful companies that did, really great work, but also they all came from like the old way of doing politics that is, very much like if you were to take the Silicon Valley startup mentality and throw it with like the political instinct and mush it together, that's what a lot of these agencies are like, right? So very high burnout culture,
Mm.
very working till midnight, 1 a.m., etc. I had kids at the time. I started like, really wanted to refocus on sort of how do I balance having a career and build out this company while having a family as well. And sort of looked around, and that we kind of identified that could be one of our key differentiators as a company is that we both want that. I'm pretty sure there's other staff that would want that, and pretty sure there's other clients that would want that too. So we really set about trying to create a different type of, political company that really was more emphasized on delivering really great work, but also balancing that with like appropriate, company culture that didn't celebrate burnout, but gave people the tools in which to do really great work while also maintaining like a proper life.
And one of the unique things about your industry is we were talking before, and you said during different campaign cycles, you go from 12 to 50 people in a span of a couple of months, and then back down again because you have to staff up and then staff back down again. That just it seems so difficult. Talk about how you manage to manage that process.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, yeah, we'll go anywhere from 20 to 18 up to upwards of 50 over a 3 to 6 month period. So
Mm.
every 2 years. I mean, the hardest part is you have to create a process in place. The checklist manifesto was one of the first books that really was like stuck with us as we were building it out. Is like the only way to feel comfortable letting go of control of part of these processes is knowing that there's a process in place that people are following. That like if they do all these things, that the product will be what is up to the standards of the company. So, we spent a lot of time putting together, really strict processes there, while also balancing that with like not overdoing processes. Because I think oftentimes as companies that are building this out, they can get so focused on process, they forget about product. And so really making sure we had that good balance there, really instituting really good training, really good culture, and a really good, sort of learning environment for folks. So we really encourage, as staff are being onboarded, there's a whole period of making sure that they are understanding what's happening. They feel comfortable asking questions. They're allowed to make mistakes, and we have, different, uh, nets along the way to make sure that the mistake isn't so dramatic it's not fixable.
Hmm.
But really making it comfortable for people if they do make a mistake to own it and come to us with it versus trying to hide it and like kind of push it through, so that we're able to have a learning moment while also making sure that the product maintains itself. So,
Yeah.
process number one. And we've really built that out a lot over the past, 15
Yeah.
years.
When I was an attorney practicing law, what stressed me out was that every month I was starting over from zero. Literally, like, there's no guarantee that I would continue to have the clients from the previous month and people would come and go all the time. And that totally stressed me out. From a cash flow standpoint, it's hard to manage that. And I didn't have a big team. Did it take a while for you to figure out how to manage cash flow so that, during the December and after elections, after primaries, that you have a way of kind of managing your cash flow and your expenses?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think having the benefit, having grown up in a political industry, political family industry, and then having been at another firm for 10 years, managing sort of all their books, sort of, I got to see a pretty good insight of like what was working and what wasn't. And so one of the first things we did when we had the ability was like making sure we had the line of credit to cover us for those down parts. But yeah, we make 80% of our income 3 months every 2 years, which generally would translate to,
Wow.
that's what family does too. So our family budget's a 4-year budget, kind of planned out. We review every month to make sure we're in line there. So there's some general adjustments that have to be made, as an individual and as a company, but just really have to be mindful about planning it out. And then as you mentioned about like no guarantee of clients, it's the irony of the political work is oftentimes if you're successful and you get the person elected, you've now lost a client versus if they lose, there's a potential they're going to run again. So it's this perverse incentive. You obviously want your person to be successful and win because that's the good narrative to tell. That's the good
Right.
story to tell. But from a business standpoint, oftentimes it can mean, that you've just lost, that revenue stream for
Right.
another 4 years unless they decide to run for something bigger or districts gets changed around and they get challenged in a primary or something like that. So it's a very weird industry to sort of
If you're
navigate on.
successful, if you do your job well, you are not rewarded by the client goes away. Yeah.
Correct. And
Yeah.
hopefully they're a good reference. And, we track all of our incoming business development pretty well. And, I'd say more than 50% comes from referrals. So it's not that it doesn't pay off,
Yeah.
but certainly make it more challenging as you're trying to navigate what that next 2-year cycle looks like.
Is it hard generating those referrals when your clients are spread out all around the country and, you're in Washington, D.C.? Like in the early days, did you have to travel a lot to go do face to face with
Yeah, I mean,
clients or?
that used to be, it used to be a road warrior all the time. I
Yeah.
think COVID has helped, whether it helped change that or not, like it certainly changed the expectation that all these
Yeah.
these things are in person, et cetera. But I gotta say, like, there's nothing really beats the in-person conversations. And so, what we have done strategically is that as we hire folks to do business development with us and work with us, we try to hire regionally as well. So I'm the only person that's based in Washington, D.C. The rest of my staff is all over the country. So that helps to make sure that you have your hands in markets that are going to be helpful, and then we just make sure that to do the rounds strategically as we're sort of traveling to make those connections and keep those things fresh.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, go ahead. I want to ask you about what you've witnessed in the different leaders that you've worked with and the leadership qualities. Because, one of the biggest questions I get over and over again from people is what were they like? People ask me what Bill Clinton was like. I had the benefit of meeting, President Obama before he became president. I actually met him at a nadir in his campaign when everyone thought that Hillary Clinton would win the nomination. No one thought he was going to win. And he had this kind of quiet confidence to him. And you think about leaders that you've been around in the hubbub and the craziness of campaigns. Some of them lose their shit. Others are calm, cool, and collected. Talk a little bit about some of the leaders that you've worked with and the qualities that you see in them.
yeah, no, I think John Bel Edwards was governor of Louisiana, and how he presented himself in the campaign and in office was exactly who he was behind the scenes, right? So, very, very direct, very confident, very open to sort of, feedback, but ultimately was going to be the decision maker. And you can kind of see that. And in contrast to some of the other candidates we worked with who, you could tell were not as confident as they presented or wanted people to believe. And that sort of neuroses, translated into sort of how their campaign was run, how their
Yep.
offices were run. Like they just couldn't help but get their hands in things out of a sense of, frankly, probably just a lack of self-confidence, ironically. So you see that play out a lot. The types of people that are brought into campaigns that choose to run for office are usually highly competent, and very, very well suited for what they do, or have such strong blind sights based on ego, that they're oblivious to the feedback
Right.
of what they probably should be doing.
Right.
So yeah, lots of different examples of good and poor leadership in that regard.
Yeah. Early on, you got burned a lot. You didn't have contracts, and politics is it's such a relationship business. It's easy to assume that, oh, we don't need to do a contract. People will, because of their relationship, they're certainly going to pay me, but that didn't always work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of relationships and sort of, within politics in particular, like, hopefully you believe in the causes and the people you're working for. So you're caught up in sort of not necessarily emotional, but you're not don't always have your business hat on. So yeah, definitely in the first couple of years, numerous times where we'd give a candidate the benefit of the doubt that they'll pay, and that they're good for it, et cetera, and got burned, get caught, not getting paid for any of the work we did, and that's doubly bad in the direct mail industry because you're fronting postage. There's not a lot of places where there's wiggle room for you to claw back stuff. You had to have paid to get that going. So learn that lesson the hard way, making sure the contracts are in place and that we don't do anything till we're paid at this point. Because the other thing that's unique about political campaigns is by definition their goal is to be out of money by the time we get to election day. And so if you haven't collected everything by the time election day comes, that business is shutting down and there's no money to collect and there's no one to collect from. So
Yeah.
definitely a high risk
I've
scenario
always
there.
thought that's the craziest things about campaigns is managing that money so that you don't want to end up with $100,000 or $1 million in the bank on the day after the election, or else you lose by a couple votes. And you're like, damn it, we could have won if we
100%.
just spent all this money. On the other hand, you can't run out of money a week or two before the election.
Yeah, and then depending on sort of what the candidate's background, we'll have candidates that get that and then understand that we're supposed to, like, one, this money isn't theirs, they've raised it,
Yeah.
and the intent is for the money to the people who are donating this because they want you to win and therefore do what you need to do to win. Other folks sort of can't, they can't separate those two things, so they'll feel like they should be saving it. There's like a saving
Mm,
mentality still. And it is not like the consultants are saying spend to spend for spend's sake, but like to your point, if you lose and you have $250,000 left in the bank, there's a lot of, oh, whoa, like what ifs, what should we have been doing
yeah.
differently? So yeah, it's a very, very different beast. Fortunately, there's a lot more software now that's much better about predicting budgets, and doing cash flow based on that unique scenario, which is the exact
Yeah.
opposite of most businesses would be. But the goal is to get to zero, and can you do the lever spend appropriately month by
And
month?
there's this weird thing with these elections now where like something might get in the news and then a bunch of online donations come in and you couldn't have predicted that thing that got in the news at the last minute, a week before the election, it gets a bunch of online donations.
Yep, and which is can be problematic too. Is like then you get those last 2 weeks of spend, those big bumps that come in based on something that happened online or some viral moment. Like, how do you execute that? How do you spend that? And so that's where direct mail doesn't have much of an opportunity there, but digital and television, obviously, you kind of plus up those and hopefully to do more there.
Yeah, yeah. You made a business decision for the company. We talked about earlier how, initially you've eliminated 50% of the potential clients from hiring you because we're a two-party system here in the United States for the most part. And so, if you're not going to be hired by the Republicans, you're only going to be hired by the Democrats. That's basically, half right there. But you also made a decision to not just limit yourself to the moderates or the progressives, but to be broader. So talk a little bit about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this idea of like the Big Ten party, and we really sort of believe that, and also we have folks that live all across the country. So a San Francisco Democrat could be very different than a Midwest Iowa Democrat, and so we really pride ourselves on being intentional about working for the candidate in the districts that we're in, and so we elected folks that were from like Privilege, Jayapal, and Seattle to John Bel Edwards in Louisiana, and everyone in between, really sort of with this idea that the work that we do is about getting to know who the voters are, what those target audiences are, who our candidates are, and being reflective of their voice and what they need in those districts versus sort of some broad spectrum, ideology within the party.
Yeah.
And,
And did
and
you,
helpful.
is it hard if you're like, say you're going up against a local consultant who knows the industry, knows the area, and you're, talking to the candidate and you're saying, well, we have a formula that works in any area, but the locals are saying, well, you don't know this district. Is that a
Yeah, I
difficult
mean,
conversation to have?
that is a very common conversation in nearly every campaign we're in. Is like we do things differently here. Is like
Yeah.
very much what every
Yeah.
campaign says, and
Yeah.
there's some truth to that. Oftentimes, that's more about what happens on the ground, right? It's like it is what are the meetings that you have to have locally to get X, Y, or Z folks on board. That's then going to mean that you have the 100 supporters come out because they can open up their volunteer army to do the field operations for you. Oftentimes, it's a little less about sort of the actual communications program, because ultimately, communicating with voters is communicating with voters, and as long as you're listening to what's being said on the ground from the voters and from the candidates, and you're speaking authentically, and they're staying true to who they are and to their district, it's inconsequential whether you're local or not. But we also have mostly local folks. So again, I'm the only person based in DC. Everyone else is sort of out in the States, and I think that proves pretty helpful for us as well.
Yeah. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, what was going through your mind at that period of time?
It was terrifying. I mean, particularly from we were getting hit from all sides as a political direct mail firm. One, were there going to be elections?
Right.
Two, was the post office going to deliver anything?
Mm,
Three, if you recall, there was a time when like people weren't touching their mail because they
yeah.
thought we could get it to like where people interact with the thing that we're doing. And then fourth was like, oh no, there's no more paper left because all these paper mills shut down.
Oh,
And
jeez.
when they did ramp back up, they weren't doing paper products like for print. They were doing it for packaging. So
Mm,
a lot of our mills shut down during that pandemic, and when they reopened, they were creating boxes instead of paper. And so there's actually a huge glut, or a huge scarcity of paper. So we had to make a business decision. We went and got a loan, and we bought essentially futures of paper,
wow.
and hedged there and bought a whole bunch of paper from the paper mills to hold for that
Wow.
cycle that we were able to service our clients. And it ended up paying off. And we were able to do our work for our clients and ended up actually being able to help out a lot of our competitors who hadn't done that.
How
And
scary was that
terrifying.
decision? Yeah. Wait, and you
Hard.
helped your competitors who hadn't done it?
Yeah. So they had some folks just hadn't planned like that or just didn't have the funds to sort of help execute on that. So if folks came to us, one of the things that I've always prided myself on in the industry is being sort of someone you're competitive, but you're not to the point of sort of like you're trying to take someone out, right? And so like I think your own ethics and your own morality and sort of your integrity is key no matter what you
Mm,
do. So we always try to sort of be that person that helps folks out. And so sometimes that meant it was a competitor that needed some paper. We can push it over. Other times, they weren't able to service it all, so like they just sent that client over to us for us to finish the job.
mm,
It was a terrifying thing to do because one, it's already hard enough to explain to a bank what the political industry looks like and the fact that how we make our money, and then secondly to like then tell them that we need money for paper,
yeah, of all
for
things.
actual physical paper that's going to be sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah.
Was a whole nother level of conversation to try to explain to a bank.
Because
But
there's probably still warehouses of masks and hand sanitizer that didn't
totally,
get fully utilized.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was fun, but we got through it. Probably had one of our better years, honestly, and learned kind of forced us to make some pretty strategic changes to how we operate the business that long term are beneficial for us in terms of getting a little tighter, a little grittier on production, and then really dive in head first and sort of how do we operate as a fully remote company, versus before we were remote but had certain offices where people worked in person, et cetera. So really turned on the entirely fully remote operations from that point on.
Yeah. And partway into the pandemic, you started another company, an e-commerce platform. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about what inspired that.
Yeah, so leading up to that 18 and 19, we had done, we do print work, so we do direct mail. We also do anything that prints, and so oftentimes clients would have us do, T-shirts or yard signs or things that were like more merchandise. And looking at the books after 18 and 19, I started to see this line item of like non-direct mail kind of creep up a little bit, and my partner and I both looked at each other like there might be something there. And then as COVID hit, you know all of a sudden people going and picking up the yard signs wasn't a thing any longer, and so we had already had some established relationships for creating yard signs and whatnot, and just essentially created virtual yard sign captaining, but needed a site to be able to do that distribution. So really quickly just sort of pivoted, created Goodstock as like a secondary company for us to do e-commerce and merchandise. And it kind of grew from there. So became its fully owned company. So we do a platform that does sales tax, full federal elections compliance reporting, and allows any nonprofit, any campaign, any business really to set up their own store at no cost and sell their T-shirts, their hats, their yard signs, etc. And it did a need for COVID at the time, but since then has really proven as a really valuable asset for a lot of these campaigns that
Yeah.
want to take advantage of a viral moment, but don't know if it's going to happen yet.
Yeah. I know that you as a company are focused on not just political clients' campaigns, but also corporate or businesses.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the lessons and how you can apply that into the business world.
Yeah, I mean, the uniqueness about, political campaigns is, depending on the district, but for most places, a victory is 50% plus one. So if you get 49% market share, you failed, which from a business standpoint is like an incredibly high threshold.
Incredibly. Yeah.
So, we've taken, particularly in direct mail, there's this idea of sort of like targeting and accountability and sort of tracking and funnels that, can really apply well to companies and nonprofits, and other businesses that might want to influence public opinion, but not necessarily through electoral. So, we do a lot of grass tops work, for, organizations that want to influence public opinion, on zoning, or want to influence public opinion on a certain county board issue, et cetera, and are able to come in and use a lot of what we learned on campaigns and apply that to those as well. So, the messaging, the targeting, the fact that you can, really have 10 different unique messages going out to different audiences with different calls to action, click-throughs on QR codes, and be able to sort of really fall through and have, a series of communications and leveling up in the funnel that, a lot of companies already do, but may not have done it with like the political mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I actually am fascinated by this topic because I think it's very popular to talk about how the lessons from business should be used in government, but not many people talk about the lessons that can come from campaigns and government and politics and be applied in the business world. So I think it's really interesting that you're doing that.
Yeah, and from an entrepreneurial standpoint, like running a political consulting shop is like, every 2 years, essentially, I'm running a startup. So
That's amazing. Yeah.
I feel like I have like at least 5 cycles worth of startup lessons that I've learned along the way.
Yeah, I don't know how you sleep at night, but more power to you. All right,
A lot of meditation.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I want to wrap up with my gratitude question. So I'm a big fan of practicing gratitude, and I'm also a big fan of giving our guests a little space to give a shout out to any particular peers or contemporaries who've helped them in their journey. Who would you want to acknowledge?
Yeah, so I mean, one of my very first boss out of when I moved to DC was a guy named Chris Cooper. So he became partner actually that same cycle at the direct mail firm I was at, and I was one of his assistants. And the level of sort of responsibility he gave me and sort of latitude to sort of learn and fail in a safety net was just phenomenal. He really gave me the confidence that like I knew what I was doing and like I could do this. Let me sit in on things and learn from him in a way that was really 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 incredible. And since then has continued to help me with my getting a job right after that. And then since then, as I started my own company, always being a really wonderful, sounding board and referral of business and just someone that I can kind of count on to talk to. So he's been a wonderful partner on this path. And then his mentor, Rich Schlackman, also has been tremendous. So both those gentlemen have been phenomenal and really helpful in my career.
And I know that you also have been active in Entrepreneurs Organization, which I am as well. What has that been like for you, being around other entrepreneurs who are not in the campaign world?
Without exaggeration, a lifesaver. So I joined that in the middle of the pandemic, when we were making lists of sort of like, how does this company stay afloat? And so it was a very lonely time. And so to have, that my forum, and to have those other groups of entrepreneurs who are also going through other struggles and not feeling alone, and having other people to say, "Oh, I've been on that roller coaster before," and hearing stories about how they've come out of that roller coaster was just phenomenal. And then since that time, I've gotten far more involved. I'm on the board now, trying to do a lot more things involving both the local, but the national, and the resources there at Entrepreneurialization are just great. I couldn't speak.
Josh, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and learn more about agency?
Yeah, so agencystrategies.com is our direct mail firm, and then goodstockandco.com is our website for the e-commerce, and I'm available on LinkedIn as well. So really appreciate the time, John.
Excellent, Josh. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.